It started with silence. One night, an entire plantation fell eerily quiet. Lanterns burned low, doors stood open, and the man everyone thought they owned was suddenly gone. No alarms were raised, no struggle was heard, just abandoned cups on tables and a trail of unanswered questions leading into the dark. By sunrise, the master's world had collapsed. Some said the slave had planned it for months. Others believed fate finally chose a side. But what terrified everyone most wasn't how he escaped. It was how carefully everything had been timed. This is the haunting story of a man who vanished into freedom and left a system built on cruelty shaking in his wake. The night Mama Zeke died, she pressed a small cloth bag into my hands and whispered 3 words that would change everything. Remember the roots. I was 12 years old, still young enough that Master Thornhill hadn't yet moved me from house service to the fields, still naive enough to believe that obedience might earn me something resembling mercy. Mama Zeke, not my blood mother, but the woman who raised me after mine was sold downriver, had been the plantation's herb woman. She knew which leaves would break a fever, which bark would ease the pain of a whipping, which flowers would help a woman bring a child into this cruel world or prevent one from coming at all. She also knew which roots could kill. "Everything I taught you about healing, child," she rasped, her weathered hand trembling against mine, "has a shadow side. The medicine that soothes in small doses will stop a heart in large ones. The tea that brings sleep can bring the long sleep. Remember this, Dinah. Remember when the time comes." I didn't understand then. I clutched that bag of dried roots and seeds, tucked it into the hem of my dress where no overseer would think to look, and I wept when they buried Mama Zeke in the plot behind the quarters, in ground too poor to grow cotton, but apparently good enough for bodies that had been worked to pieces. 8 more years would pass before I understood what she'd been trying to tell me. 8 years of watching Master Thornhill grow wealthier while we grew hungrier. 8 years of his son, Thomas, learning to use the whip with the same casual cruelty as his father. 8 years of watching my friend Sarah lose 2 children before they could walk, their small bodies unable to withstand the weakness that began in the womb when their mother couldn't get enough to eat. 8 years of my own body becoming a battlefield. I was 20 when Master Thornhill first pushed open the door of the small room I shared with 3 other house girls. 20 when I learned that the locks in this place only worked one way, to keep us in, never to keep them out. 20 when I discovered that there were violations worse than the whip, humiliations that left no scars the eye could see, but that carved something hollow and sharp inside your chest, a wound that wouldn't close. After her, the 3rd time, I retrieved Mama Zeke's bag from its hiding place in my mattress and held it to my face, breathing in the musty scent of dried roots and old wisdom. I thought about shadow sides, about how the tools of healing could become instruments of something else entirely, about how a person who had been treated like property for 2 decades might begin to reason that those who traded in human flesh had forfeited their claim to human mercy. The idea came to me slowly, like water seeping through soil, not all at once, but in small revelations that accumulated over weeks. The big house kitchen where I worked was the heart of the plantation's life. Everything that sustained the Thornhill family passed through my hands or those of the other kitchen workers, Clara, Big Moses, and young James, whose mother had been sold the year before, when she became too ill to work. We prepared their elaborate meals while surviving on scraps and cornmeal. We baked their breads and pastries, while our own children's bellies swelled with hunger. We spiced their meats with careful precision while they complained about trivial matters, their biggest concern whether their mutton was sufficiently tender, whether their wine was properly chilled. I began to watch the rhythms of the house with new attention. Master Thornhill took his coffee each morning at 6. His wife, Constance, took tea at 4. Every Saturday evening, they hosted dinner for neighboring plantation owners, the Calverts, the Merriweathers, and the Suttons. These affairs were elaborate, requiring days of preparation, and they always included soup course, fish course, meat course, and dessert. These Saturday dinners were when they would discuss business, the price of cotton, the cost of seed, the management of their human property. I served their food and poured their wine while they debated whether it was more economical to work an enslaved person to death in 7 years and purchase another, or to provide slightly better conditions that might extend their working life to 15. They discussed us like we were cattle, like we were equipment that depreciated with use. It was at one of these dinners that I learned Master Thornhill was planning to sell Big Moses's daughter, Lucy, to a buyer from New Orleans. Moses was like a father to me, had been since Mama Zeke passed. Lucy was barely 16, bright and quick and kind, and we all knew what kind of work young women were bought for in New Orleans. She would be swallowed by that terrible city, lost to us forever, destroyed in ways too awful to speak aloud. That night, after I'd cleared the dishes and washed them while Clara swept the dining room floor, I sat on the back steps of the kitchen house and made my decision. I would not let this happen, could not let it happen. If I did nothing, Lucy would be gone within the month. If I did nothing, nothing would ever change. We would continue to be used and sold and worked to death, generation after generation, until there was nothing left of us but ghosts and sorrow. Mama Zeke's bag seemed to burn against my skin where I tucked it into my pocket. I began my preparations the next morning. The root that Mama Zeke had called the bitter one grew wild in the woods at the edge of the plantation. Its white flowers innocent looking, its tuberous roots containing a poison that would cause weakness, confusion, and eventually death if consumed in sufficient quantity. Mixed with the right herbs, prepared correctly, it could be made nearly tasteless, especially in strongly flavored dishes. But I would need more than poison. I would need a plan for what came next. Because there was no scenario where I poisoned the masters and was allowed to simply walk away. Every enslaved person within 50 miles would be rounded up, questioned, tortured, likely hanged whether guilty or not. This wasn't just about ending the Thornhill reign of cruelty. It was about escape, freedom, making sure that at least some of us survived to live as humans rather than property. I spoke first to Big Moses, late one night when I brought him water at the stable where he slept. I told him everything about Lucy's impending sale, about my plan, about the terrible risk and the slim hope of success. He listened without interrupting, his broad face impossible to read in the darkness. When I finished, he was silent for so long, I thought He might turn me in, might decide the risk was too great. Finally, he spoke. How many can we save? I don't know, I admitted. The ones we can trust absolutely. The ones who can move fast. Children will slow us down, but we can't leave them. Maybe 20, 30. The timing matters, Moses said. We'd need the Saturday dinner, when all the neighboring masters are here. Take them all out at once. It'll be days before anyone notices something's wrong. Days before they can organize a pursuit. That's what I was thinking, I said, relief flooding through me. I wasn't alone in this anymore. Over the next 2 weeks, Moses and I carefully, cautiously brought others into the plan. Clara, whose husband had been beaten to death the previous year for breaking a plow blade. Samuel, who bore scars across his entire back from a whipping that had nearly killed him. Young James, whose eyes still held tears every night when he thought about his mother. Sarah, who had nothing left to lose after watching her children die. We kept the circle small, 23 people in total, including 5 children. Any larger and the secret would spread. Someone would talk, intentionally or accidentally, and we'd all be killed before we could make our move. The hardest part was waiting, acting normal while rage and fear and desperate hope warred inside me. Serving Master Thornhill his coffee each morning and imagining how his face would look when the poison began its work. Pressing his shirts and thinking about Lucy, about how we might save her from that fate in New Orleans. The Saturday before Lucy was set to be sold, we enacted our plan. I spent 3 days preparing the dinner with Clara, exactly as we always did, giving no hint that anything was different. Oyster soup with cream, roasted bass with lemon and herbs, venison with a rich wine reduction, syllabub for dessert. Everything as elaborate and perfect as the Thornhills expected. The bitter root went into the wine reduction, boiled down until it was concentrated and distributed throughout the sauce that would cover the venison. I tested the dosage carefully on a rat I'd trapped in the cellar. Enough to kill relatively quickly, but not so much that the taste would be obviously wrong. The dinner began at 7. By 8, I'd served the venison course and poured more wine. The Thornhills and their guests ate with their usual enthusiasm, praising Clara's cooking, complimenting the tenderness of the meat. Master Thornhill refilled his own plate twice. Mrs. Calvert declared it the best venison she'd ever tasted. By 9, as I was clearing the plates, Master Sutton complained of dizziness. Mrs. Thornhill said she felt oddly weak. Master Calvert stood to excuse himself and collapsed before he'd taken 2 steps. By 10, all 8 of our masters were violently ill, sprawled across the dining room and parlor, too confused and disoriented to call for help, their bodies shutting down as the poison did its methodical work. I stood in the doorway and watched Master Thornhill struggle for breath, his face gray, his eyes finding mine. Some part of him seemed to understand. His mouth moved, trying to form words that wouldn't come. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt, just a vast emptiness where something human used to be. He had made me into this. All of them had. By midnight, they were all dead. We moved quickly then, knowing we had perhaps a day's head start before anyone came looking. Moses broke into the overseer's cabin while the man was passed out drunk and stole 2 rifles and ammunition. Clara raided the big house for food, blankets, anything we could carry. I found the strong box where Master Thornhill kept cash and took every dollar, nearly 600 in total, enough to maybe buy our safety if we made it far enough north. We left just after 2 in the morning, 23 people moving through darkness toward freedom. We had no map beyond what Moses had learned from other enslaved people who tried to escape over the years. Head north, follow the stars, avoid roads during daylight. We knew there were sympathetic people along the way, what they called conductors on the Underground Railroad, though we had no way of knowing exactly where they were. The first 3 days were the hardest. We moved at night and hid during the day, sleeping in turns, keeping the children quiet with strips of cloth soaked in sugar water. Every sound was a threat. Every dog bark in the distance made us freeze, wondering if they'd sent the hounds after us already. On the 4th day, as we huddled in a dense thicket near a creek, young James came running back from where he'd been keeping watch. "Riders," he gasped, "coming up the road." We went absolutely still. Through the branches, I could see 3 men on horseback, moving slowly, searching. Slave catchers, almost certainly. Someone had discovered the bodies at Thornhill Plantation, and the hunt was on. They passed within 20 yards of our hiding place. One of the horses seemed to sense something and whinnied nervously, but its rider pulled it back to the road. "Nothing here," he called to the others. "Let's try the river crossing." We waited until the sound of hooves faded completely before anyone moved. That night, we encountered our first conductor, a Quaker woman named Ruth, who operated a small farm with her husband. She'd been watching for escapees, she said, had heard that something significant had happened at the Thornhill Plantation, something that had every slave catcher in 3 counties stirred up like a hornet's nest. "They're saying 8 plantation owners were murdered," she told us as she served soup and bread in her barn. "They're saying it was a coordinated uprising. They're terrified." "Good," Moses said quietly. "They should be." Ruth helped us for 2 days, let us rest and eat real food, then sent us north with directions to the next station. "There's a price on all your heads now," she warned, "especially you, Dinah. They know it was poison. They know it came from the kitchen. They're offering $500 for your capture." The number should have frightened me. Instead, I felt something almost like pride. I had been property worth perhaps $800 to Master Thornhill. Now I was worth $500 in reward money. My price had gone up even as I'd claimed my freedom. We traveled for 6 more weeks, moving from safe house to safe house, always north, always running. We lost James to fever in Pennsylvania, wrapped his body in a blanket and buried him beside a river, said prayers over his grave, and moved on because we had to. Lucy cried for 3 days straight, and I held her while she shook, thinking about how this pain was still better than the fate that had awaited her in New Orleans. In late October, we crossed into Canada, 22 of us, exhausted and underfed, but alive, free. We settled in a small community of formerly enslaved people outside of Toronto. Moses found work as a carpenter. Clara started taking in sewing. I used some of Master Thornhill's stolen money to purchase a small house, and I began learning medicine again. Real medicine this time, not the shadow knowledge I'd used to free us. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, if I have nightmares about the 8 people I killed that Saturday night. The answer is complicated. I ended 8 lives. I stole from them what they had stolen from thousands. The chance to grow old, to see their children grow, to wake up each morning and choose how to spend their day. But I also saved 22 lives, including my own. I gave us the chance to be fully human, not property. I gave Lucy the chance to marry a kind man and have children who will never know what it means to be owned. I gave Moses the chance to build furniture instead of watching his daughter be sold away. I gave myself the chance to heal instead of harm. So no, I don't regret it. What was done to us was evil. What I did was survival. Mama Zeke taught me that every medicine has a shadow side, that the same knowledge that heals can also harm. But she also taught me something else, something I only understood after it was over, that people who have been treated as less than human have no obligation to pretend their masters are more than human. Master Thornhill liked to say he owned me, but you can't own a person. You can only pretend to while you destroy something precious and irreplaceable. In the end, I chose freedom over revenge, survival over submission, life over the slow death of enslavement. I chose to remember the roots, both the ones that heal and the ones that kill, both the roots that anchored me to that terrible place and the roots I've planted here in free soil. Every garden has poison and medicine growing side by side. Mama Zeke knew that. Now I do too. I am Dinah. I was enslaved. I freed myself. And I will never, ever be property again.